This morning, and thank you ever so much for coming all the way down from Edinburgh to join us today at this session on problem drug use in Scotland. Now, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your own personal testimony about some of the issues that you've been confronting. So what we're going to do is just start the whole session off where we'll go from left to right, from my left to right, give you all 5 minutes or so just to tell us about what it's been like for you, your real life experience, and please be as open as you can with the committee. And then once we've concluded that, we might ask you some questions if that's okay, yeah? So to get started, we'll maybe ask you, Colin, to go first.
I'm Colin Heckle, I'm 46 years of age. I first started using substances about 10 or 11 years old. That was solvents. And I noticed very quickly that the older ones in the community, they were on solvents and all, so it was kind of, that was normal for me to see. That's what grown-ups done. And that probably led me on to other things. Even when I say it wouldn't lead me on to other things, it probably led me on to other things. Because of the circumstances at the time, the area I was living in was getting pulled down. It was an area of urban deprivation. There was high unemployment, there was high crime, and it seemed as if nobody was working. Bearing in mind I grew up during the miner strikes and that, and it was just probably a sense of hopelessness with the way the area was. There was no investment in the area, there was no community centre as such. The one that was in our area was kind of on like a boundary between the two housing areas who were part of the same housing area, but we classed them as two different areas, so there was that rivalry. So it was just kind of all stuff like that just, for me looking back, was just a sense of no hope, no sense of purpose, and just that feeling of apathy, a feeling of what's the point. And I coped with that with using substances, and I ended up using substances for nearly 30 years of my life before I got into recovery. And part of my recovery's led me down here a day to speaking to yourselves to try and get things changed. Hopefully get things changed. That's about the best I can say.
Well, thank you ever so much for that, Colin. That's really, really helpful. Sharon.
Yeah, my name's Sharon Brand. I'm 41 years old. I'm from Dundee. My experience is quite similar to Colin's. I started drinking alcohol quite early on, maybe about 12, 13. I experimented with cocaine, amphetamine during my teenage years. I lived in London at that time. I was brought up in London. I went to college, started university, and then I moved back to Dundee. I had my first son at 21, and then my second at 25. In the space of, I'd say, 3 weeks, I lost my grandparent, my grandmother, and my dad emigrated. My support system left, everything kind of fell apart around us, and I was associated with people that were using heroin, and I kind of succumbed to that after about a year. And I used heroin for about 7 years, and then got into treatment, and I was on methadone for 3. And then I reduced off my methadone myself, and now I'm in recovery and do a lot of work in Dundee to try and establish a recovery community as such. Yeah.
Great, excellent. Thank you ever so much for that. Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Ferguson, 45 years of age. I grew up in an area up in Scotland, Stirling, with St Onions, and it was quite a deprived area. A lot of unemployment, but there was a lot of sense of love in the community. It was a close-knit community, and along with that there was a lot of alcohol use in the community, and kind of grew up around that. So I got into my first mind-altering substances about the age of 12, 13, sniffing solvents and stuff. Started being chaotic in school, chaotic in my community, ended up in children's homes. So went through social services up until the age of about 14. But while I was in there, that's when my behaviours went really off the wall, when I started hanging about with the wrong people. First got introduced to cannabis, then I was off and running on the drug scene. Could go through all the drugologies, but took me to a dark place. Suicidal thoughts. Wasn't wanting to live, but wasn't wanting to die at the same time. So my life got chaotic. I ended up in institutions, prisons, psychiatric wards, rehabilitation centres. I ended up with services on a methadone programme on and off for nearly 19 years. But I think that was probably a barrier for me to get into recovery, being on a methadone programme that long. But I wasn't engaging with the services properly. But the first time probably that I did really engage was about 3.5 years ago. And it was the first time I was showed empathy and compassion and care from a service worker. Nearly 20 years in that service, the first time I actually felt a bit of compassion, care and empathy. And that's when my journey began, when I got showed that. Eventually came off my prescription nearly 2.5 years ago now, which was hard. First time I'd been abstinent in recovery in my whole life. I started using drugs. Then over 15 months ago now, I got employed by Addiction and Support and Counselling. Went through the recovery communities, volunteering, peer supporting, and then a job came up and I got it. It was my first ever job at 43-year-old, 44-year-old, and I've not looked back since. I've turned my adversities in my life now into my assets to help other people. That's the biggest thing I can do today. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Hannah.
Hi, good morning. I'm Hannah Snow. I'm 26, from Aberdeen. I had substance misuse / addiction for 13 years. I was involved with a lot of services. I experienced criminal justice services, prison services, mental health services. I progressed through a number of drugs. But I think it's really important that it's not really talked about a specific drug. Any addiction can come from the use of drugs. I got into recovery 18 months ago, and I am abstinent, so my recovery is based on no mood or mind altering substances, and I had to kind of go down that route for myself, because it was kind of the only time I could kind of emotionally connect with another person when I had a clear state of mind. I experienced homelessness from the age of 16 to 22, where I secured myself a permanent residence. But I'm really nervous, I'm like shaking right now.
Easy,
It's so overwhelming. But no, I'm here to kind of, I've read into a lot about this, and I've realised you've been doing a lot of inquiries over the last 10 years. So I'm kind of intrigued to know what comes out of this today, and for you to get some information from me to help you on your journey.
Great. Well, thank you ever so much for that. It was really helpful, and we'll ask just some questions if that's okay, just about maybe your own experience and about some of the things that happen. I'm probably most interested in about the interventions you've maybe had with health services or criminal justice services. I've been listening to you all here. You've all seemed to have come through the other end, and you're now all in recovery. You're now making valuable contributions to this particular debate. Could you maybe just talk a little bit about some of the interventions you had, whether that's been through the police, whether it's been through other services getting involved, and how helpful they were, or how maybe problematic they were in terms of getting you to where you are just now? Could we maybe start with you, Scott, if that's all right, yeah?
I was involved in criminal justice services for multiple years. and as I said as well, I wasn't engaging with these services properly, because I was probably always either on some kind of mind on substance, or I'd just been released from prison on several occasions, and I just wasn't properly engaging until I got showed that first bit of compassion and that first bit of empathy, and I felt that care from the service.
And who did you get that from then? Which service was that?
Community Alcohol and Drug Services, and from a criminal justice worker, because she was doing a lot of linkage work with my community alcohol and drug service worker. So they were singing off the same hymn sheet. They knew what stage I was at, where I was at, and until I got showed that first bit of compassion and empathy, that I didn't feel like I was worthless. And cause that's the way I felt as well. I felt worthless because that's where my addiction had took me. I was in and out of homeless accommodations, and I just couldn't get it until I got showed that compassion and empathy, and I got that sense of belief in myself for the first time that I could maybe change.
Yeah. And what about the rest of you? Is there any positive interventions like that, or anything that's gone badly wrong about how your addiction was being dealt with by a range of services? Hannah, please.
My experience through the prison service and the social work service, I had, from the age of 16, I had a 10-year period where I was involved with criminal justice work and in and out of prison a lot. And for me, I would do a prison sentence, and on the day of release, I would get told to report to the council, and they would issue me somewhere to stay, So for an 18-month period of time, I was in an environment where I had to take no responsibility. Everything was done for me. To going out into the community, I didn't have the ability to communicate at a level, that was, shall we say, my behaviours and my actions, the way I behaved and conducted myself in my active addiction, I couldn't get my point across of how frustrated and vulnerable and angry I was at the situation I was in. So the easiest option for me, and the only thing that I knew how to do at that time, was to go and use drugs. And that can sound like a cop-out, and it can sound like a lack of responsibility for life choices that I should be making. I shouldn't have been in prison in the first place, I understand that. But I think there's a gap in the process of, because if you look at it, a third of criminals that get out of prison, that are released from prison, are in addiction or have had addiction problems since they went into prison. And what hope really do they have if they're just released?
Can I just ask, how did you find yourself caught up in the criminal justice system? Because this is something we've been hearing a lot, like a lot of people who are drug users find themselves in prison, and what you're telling us, there wasn't really the service to help you get back into the community effectively.
For me, I went from a residential unit where I was looked after, and I got released from that residential unit at the age of 15, placed with a family, and then when I turned 16 I got asked to leave the family because I was being so chaotic. So I then went into homeless accommodation, from homeless accommodation into prison. And kind of once I was a child, I didn't know how to look after myself. I didn't know how to do simple menial tasks like work a washing machine. And when I went to prison, it was just an easier life. When I came out, I tried heroin in prison for the first time at 16. I tried diazepam in prison. There was a number of times in prison where I was approached by prison officers and told that I needed to go sort myself out because I was withdrawn from drugs. So in this situation, these prison officers knew what was going on, but yet they would rather have us in a state of, because it's less for them to deal with, it's less for them to process, and it's less work for them. But I got placed on orders, and for somebody that's life's unmanageable and chaotic, to then get asked to go to an appointment at a certain time, or fill out a form, or turn up to court, or you're living in a feral state. Your last thing on your mind is to go to appointment to check in with a social worker.
Thanks for that. Hugh, did you want to come?
Yeah, it's just Pete asked the question, how do you get into criminal justice? But every one of you were children. When you started taking drugs, or you were looked after by care, we never looked after you as a society, because you were supposed to be children getting looked after. And that seems to become history now, as showing that children were not looked after in society when they were supposed to be at the very beginning. Do you think that was, you were amongst other children who were supposed to get the same care? Did you get the proper care when you were children? And sorry if I'm taking this back to maybe a bad period in time, but if anybody can speak about it, because I think I have to stop it at the very beginning. You never asked to get into the criminal justice system. The criminals, we, the society, never looked after you.
I grew up I'm the youngest of 6 in a large household. My mum worked 3 jobs to put food on the table. I was cared for. I made my choices, probably through peer pressure, probably through witnessing, probably generational disadvantage. The people up above me, the older ones that I looked on as grown-ups, sniffing glue, drinking alcohol, because there was high levels of unemployment, and the only way to make money was criminality, because they were either on low benefits or there was no jobs. Their dads were out of jobs, and the only way to survive was through criminality. So we were looked after, but we weren't looked after the way we should have been with society, so we had to adapt, and we had to look after ourselves. So I was cared for. And I've had no justice, I've had no involvement with prisons. I've worked most of my adult life. When I wasn't working, I was claiming benefits. I struggled buying them in my addiction, but always found ways and means to get my drugs. Whether that be through criminality, I got my drugs. If I couldn't get any money, I went with it. I suffered the consequences. If I got the chance of work, I took the work on. I paid my taxes. My last job was 6.5 years, all the while addicted to heroin and alcohol.
You know, thanks very much. Can't rewind the clock and go back to changing things that's been. I think we need to look at what we can change now for the addict out there today. I mean, looking at stats, like there's 60% non-drug addicts in treatment, active treatment in England, and there's only 40% up in Scotland. You know, why is that? And I know there's in England they get a lot of funding for assertive outreach, whereas up in Scotland there's no much of that going on. About like third party sectors have got to rely on their ADPs or local ADPs for funding and stuff, whereas down in England they get a set pot of money for that assertive outreach. Now, and on top of that as well, people on ORT replacement therapy, there's a lot higher number on buprenorphine down in England. Up in Scotland there's a very low rate on that. Why is it? It's dearer. We were doing injecting provisions survey up in my local area through my work, and I'd asked one of the pharmacists how much it was for a big 5 litre tub of methadone with a pump on it, and he says £90. And I put the question to him how much was the buprenorphine, and he didn't answer. He just said, "Oh, that's well expensive." So I wasn't wanting to push him out. So I think to change this in our local areas up in Scotland, I think we need to get a lot of funding towards supporting and outreach stuff as well.
Can I maybe ask you, Sharon, the same question I asked your colleagues, just about what interventions you've had with health services, recovery services, criminal justice, and how they worked for you?
I was very fortunate. I never went through the criminal justice system whatsoever. I mean, my addiction came to a head when I was 27, and I reached out to social work for support for me and my children. The way they supported me was by removing my children and looking after them, and then leaving me to it. There was no additional support for me to address any of the issues. I didn't know how to work through my addiction, and in Dundee there wasn't very much on offer at that time anyway. Luckily for me, I had a friend who was maybe she's 5 years ahead of me in recovery, and she's mentored me the whole way through, and we're both quite active in the recovery community that exists now. I think that my children suffered quite badly because the effects of social work and intervention that they had. I think it's quite important. I know Scott says we shouldn't look to the past, but we are now supporting young people who are placed in out of the care system straight into homeless units where there's people that have been in active addiction for 20 or 30 years. These kids are going in there without any support. The places that they're getting put in don't know how to support the people that they're housing. And we're just creating we're creating another 4 people or another however many people will be sitting here another 10 or 20 years telling you exactly the same thing, because the cycle is continuing. And the intervention needs to come in early, I think, well before it gets to the point where we're supporting recovery communities or you're investing in that. It needs to be well before that. But I mean, I agree with both of them, but I'm seeing it, we're supporting kids now that have come from 3 generations of people who have been addicted, who are not addicted, but you can see it's going to happen. And unless that's addressed, then nothing's going to change.
Thank you for that. Danielle?
First of all, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today, because we'll get evidence from experts and statistics and everything, and that's important, but it's only half the story, and we can't try and inform policy if we've not got your voices, so it's so important we have them. Thank you. Colin, you talked about not having community centres and things grown up, and obviously when we're talking about young people and support for them, it's communities that don't have things like that, communities where libraries are closed, community centres are closed, and there's nothing there, one, for young people to do, but then secondly, if young folk are getting into trouble and they're maybe falling in with a crowd and thinking about trying drugs, there's not anyone for them to speak to, and there's not really any places for them to go and access help. What kind of things do you think would be good to have in communities that people could go out to? Do you think it is community hubs or?
When I was growing up, 12, 13, when I was probably just experimenting with cannabis at the time, we had youth workers in our area, we had a community flat. We also had the local social work department coming in doing, I think it was called intermediate training, intermediate treatment, and what they done was they came into the scheme, they done a set of outreach for the young people like myself, and they done intervention with us to keep us out of trouble. They tried to guide us, but at 13, 14 we thought we knew it all. We had that blasé attitude that we know best. Fair dues, we're mums and dad were in charge, but we still knew better. And looking back now, I know that's total, but I'm in a better place now, and I understand why I was at that place when I was. And again, it's all about searching for identity, going against your parents of the rebellion. And part of it I know is when you get police, can't believe I'm going to say this, when you get police coming in, and I was brought up into authority, you don't tell the police nothing, but seeing the police coming in, there's no police in your area, they're bullying your area, they're coming in like gangsters, they're dehumanising you, they're locking you up for nothing, they're charging you for nothing, you don't stand a chance. Right for it off, when you get a police officer telling you, I'll get you when you're 16. What looks that for a 13-year-old boy? And that was just my experience, and I'm probably not alone in that.
Can I ask a question about the helping the youth and our teenagers in this day and age? Is I think there's that assertive outreach that needs to be done as well. It's okay for a police officer or a prison officer to go into a school or something like that and say, give them the just say no to drugs attitude. Whereas lived experience going in my role, I've been asked on a few occasions to go down to college and speak to 15 to 17-year-olds who have maybe been going in and boasting what they've been up to at the weekends and stuff and that, and I'll go in and speak to them. So I go in and tell them my experience, what drugs done to me and how I got well from it. But I think that's really important. And also in my role, I go up to the hospital, work alongside the hospital addiction team, and speak to addicts who are maybe in there with problematic drug or alcohol misuse. A couple of occasions I've spoke to 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and one guy in particular who was only 18-year-old and he was in intensive care, he just came through, but he was still in there for observation and stuff, and I went up there to speak to him, and his father was there, and he was broken, 18-year-old, I think there's more stuff like that needed for people with lived experience to go and speak to them, that assertive outreach stuff.
Sorry. Just a bit about what Scott said, you know, going into schools, especially like academy schools, you know, like 13, 14-year-olds, and given a lived experience, you know, I've went to a few high schools in Aberdeen, where the head of the department has approached us, and we've went in and we've shared, and we've had the responses being mind blowing. You know, we've had people coming up. I've had people coming up to me at the end and asking for advice for their parents. You know, and they've been embarrassed, and it's because at that age it's all about how you dress, how you look, how you act. When if you strip it all back, they're scared. They're emotionally, they're going through a phase in their life where their emotions are all over the place, and they don't know how to talk about how they feel. So it's highlighting, for me, I would say it's highlighting a point of expressing how you feel. Because I use drugs on my feelings, I use drugs on fear-based feelings, overwhelming, vulnerability, embarrassment of coming from a family with low income and not being able to afford certain things. And I know we live in a materialistic world. That's the reality of it, as harsh as it is. And as much as we don't need the things that we think we do, at a teenage level, when you don't have what you think you need, whether it be a new pair of trainers, a new phone, you know, sometimes just taking drugs is enough to fit in. Just taking drugs is enough to feel part of some sort of thing that's going on, to take you away from how insecure you're feeling. So I think I've maybe addressing, before it gets to a point where teenagers are going and using drugs, addressing the ones that are showing signs of misbehaving, signs of vulnerability, and taking them aside and getting support for them before it goes too far. You know, and setting up some sort, I wouldn't know where to start with, but you know, you go into a school, and for me anyway, I was a very problematic child who was given support, behaviour support, taking that aside, you know, take that person aside, and I give them one-to-one and see what's really going on for them. And I know it's time consuming, but this problem's only going to get solved by putting in time and effort.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I'm going to say my own thanks to all of you for coming down and being with us today to talk about your own stories. Because I think the only way we will ever really get something done or change stuff is when people are brave enough to open up and talk about it. So genuinely, thank you very much. My question might sound like quite a simple one or straightforward, but I'd really appreciate your thoughts, which is, I kind of want to understand a little bit better about where your first exposure to drugs came from. Now, I know everyone has maybe a different story, but it was just to see if there was a theme there. For example, is it, as Colin talked about, was it peer group? Was it friends? Was it maybe in the household, because maybe there was other family members that used drugs, so you always had that exposure to it? Was it in that experimental basis because you went to, it was a house party, it was a night out, and there was something there? I mean, I'm just trying to understand where that first exposure to drugs came from, and then how it led on to sort of a more consistent use of it, if that makes sense. So any thoughts or experience you've got would be useful.
I grew up with both my parents were alcoholics, so my first exposure to any kind of substance was through my family. Okay. And it continued right through my teenage years and until late in my 20s. But yeah. I never had much of a social life as a child. I was quite isolated. I was kept at home. So every point of reference to how the world should be came from them, and where it stemmed from me, definitely, yeah.
Anybody else?
I had quite a dysfunctional upbringing. A lot of alcohol. I had family members who were heavily involved with drugs. prisons, so visiting prisons at a young age. So it was never really a deterrent to put me off it. And then it kind of just, it was the norm. It was normal. Like it was unnormal not to go home and have people fighting. And I used to go to friends' houses and be like, whoa, like it was just that was the way it was. Unfortunately.
Yeah, my family were brothers and sisters, and that were a few of them were caught in addiction. I lost my wee brother on my birthday about 24 years ago to methadone, and I lost my older brother just in December there to addiction as well. You know, and it's been, you can say past experiences as a kid, maybe trauma or whatever, adverse childhood experiences in your community, all that stuff, you know, you could pinpoint the subtle cliche, that's what addiction, that's why you went into addiction, that, you know, be choices. You know, I got to an age in my life where I knew I was doing the wrong thing, but I still choose to do it, or going and try to fit in with the peers, you know, but I think now it's not about looking at people's backgrounds and what made them take drugs. I think it's needing to look at what can you do to solve the drug problem that they do, you know, and it's not going to be any quick fix. You know, and when I lost my brother in December there, I know for a fact that he wouldn't have been able to hand in a clean drug test for at least a year and a half, but was still on 90 mils of methadone, was still on pregabalin, was still on diazepam, you know. So I think services need to have a look at the stuff like that.
And we've asked people to give us evidence and speak to us just about some of the issues around problem drug use. These are the themes that keep on coming back again and again and again. When you hear issues of deprivation, when you hear issues of childhood traumas, and I know that it's a term that, you know, like people maybe don't feel particularly comfortable, but there always seems to be this trigger point. I mean, 90% of people could use drugs and have no issue and difficulty with it at all, but there's 10% of people who possibly get caught up in drug use where it does become a particular problem. And I think what we're trying to do in Ross's questions leading to this is trying to understand what are these particular issues. There's one other thing that came in. I'm interested in your views on this when we spoke to some real life experience yesterday, and it was this idea of personal asset. Now it's a weird phrase, but it's saying that, you know, like you're middle class, whatever, you get involved in drug use might even start to become a bit problematic, but you've got these interrelationships, you've got community, you've got support. Like when you've got money, exactly. Hearing from you, Colin, you didn't seem to have that as part of your community, and there was all other types of pressures. Just trying to find out what is it that gives this what makes it problem drug use as opposed to just people having drug use and they get through their end.
I'm eager to talk about this. So you're saying 10% of people take drugs, and 90% of people take drugs, and they can take it or leave it, and the 10% people can't. The simple answer to that is that 10% of people are addicts. For me, my views and opinions are addiction is a disease. It's a disease that's uncurable, but it can be arrested, it can be cured, in the sense of changing your thinking and the way you act. Like when I got into recovery, I had been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, borderline personality disorder, and was on all different kinds of medications. And you're talking about prescription drugs, and you know, after a substantial time of abstinence, I didn't have these problems. It was the drugs that were causing this. And you can now go to a drug service who will refer you on to a program where they're giving you methadone. They're giving you methadone prescriptions. I was 19 and got put on a methadone prescription, and within 6 months I went from 30 mils of methadone to 120. And I was going into this appointments and expressing to them, look, I'm struggling, I can't stop using drugs. And their answer was then to put my methadone up. And you're saying that, you know, the kind of form that you take, once you're in that and you can't find a way to get out that, it's easier to stay there. Getting clean is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the hardest thing, but it's the most beneficial thing in my life.
Did you want to say something, Scott?
Sorry, what was your question again?
It was just what is, I mean, if most people could use drugs without having difficulty or issue, what is it about, you know, the 10% who have these difficulties? Why is that the case? Why does it become a problem for some?
I think the hardest people to reach who are problematic drug using are the ones that are maybe holding down jobs, that have got a car, that have maybe not lost their family yet, that are maybe just doing it on a Friday till a Monday, but it's still chaotic in their life. You know, I meet loads of guys and girls that come about now and they're coming looking for help because they're starting to, maybe their partners are starting to notice, they're starting to get work bad at their jobs. But for them, I think the guilt and the shame coming and looking for help is quite difficult. But you know, it doesn't matter. I think now the drug trend up in Scotland is that it's more the cocaine, people that have got a bit of money, and that then they're starting to lose everything. It doesn't matter if it's deprived or you know, deprivation has still got a big part to play up in Scotland, I think, but there's more, if you want to put it, the affluent community that are coming into addictions now.
Okay. Thanks. I know we've got a few questions. We've got Tommy, Danielle and John. Tommy.
Also, thanks for coming. It's really great that you're here and very helpful to us. One of the things we're going to be considering over the course of the next few months as we look into this is whether or not the fact that all of this activity described is currently criminal activity, illegal, whether that makes things better or worse or makes any difference at all. And that's a debate we're going to get into. So I'd be interested in any thoughts you guys have in that from the experience you've had. I mean, clearly you've all used illegal drugs, and the fact that it was illegal didn't prevent it, but what effect does the fact that you had to get your drugs from, you know, illegally, did that lead you into stuff you didn't want to go into? Did it mean you were taking stuff that you didn't want to take? Just if you could describe something about it. And also, I mean, I think it's just Scott and Hannah said that you had been in prison, but the process of coming in, you know, up against law enforcement and dealing with that, did that help, or did it make it worse? Or, you know, what should we be doing in the future to try and prevent what happened to you happening to other people?
I would have walked on glass to go and get my drugs, and whether it been a street full of glass with a plainclothes officer at every closed door, I would have still got down that street. I would have probably been apprehended. You know, I think, you know, Portugal, Canada, they went down a very, very good route that they're decriminalising a lot of the drugs, and it's working. You know, I think maybe people that are carrying small amounts of personal use drugs that are on them, you know, I think it needs to be decriminalised, because it's taking money out of the healthcare pot, it's taking money out of the criminal justice pot, imprisoning them every time, or putting them into different services, criminal justice service all the time. I think they need to be put into programmes. I think they need to get put into recovery-based stuff. You know, when they're going to use the safe injecting rooms in Portugal and stuff, they're going in there and they're meeting with a healthcare worker, or they're speaking to somebody, they get signposted to help, they get signposted to recovery services. I think that's what's needing to be done in Scotland. But I interviewed Nicola Sturgeon about 6 months ago, and I put that point across there about how does she feel about the safe injecting rooms, and she's all up for it. Holyrood are all up for it, but I said, well, what's holding them back? And they said Westminster. So I think if Westminster, I don't know what it is with their attitudes or whatever, I can't do their thinking for them, but are they paranoid to give Scotland their own legislations in case they start working, and it makes them look bad? Well, if that's the case, why not make it UK wide?
Anybody else?
I've done I've experienced like prison sentences, custodial sentences for supplying a controlled substance, so selling drugs, possession of drugs, you know, and it's not a deterrent. It's not a deterrent, and for me anyway, I can only speak for myself, because when you're in an environment like that, it's more street credit than anything else. You know, I think a person's got to be at a specific point in their life where they want to change. It doesn't matter what services and processes you input on them, whether it's a court order or a prison sentence or a fine. If they're choosing to live that lifestyle, they're going to live that lifestyle. But I do agree with a bit with what Scott said, in the sense that when you go up into court, what benefits are you getting sending a known drug user to prison to do a drug sentence to then get released to do the same thing? Enforce an order that has to put them to a recovery-based programme, instead of putting them to a criminal procedure programme where it's the cycle just starts again. You know, if you go up in court for drugs use and you're then enforced to go to a recovery programme, you've got a better chance of changing your life in that than you do changing your life in prison.
Thank you. It's Danielle, then John, then Hugh.
This might tie in a bit. I know from my own community that a lot of people will try and access recovery, and it takes quite a lot of trying for it to sometimes work. And Scott, you said that it wasn't until you were actually shown compassion and care that your proper recovery started, and that methadone was actually quite a barrier to your recovery. So for all of you, what kind of main barriers to recovery have you experienced, and then what changed that helped you to be able to start a proper recovery journey?
I was actually encouraged to go on methadone by a partner, and I was told I'd be on it for 6 weeks to stabilise me, and then 6 weeks to detox me off it. And 14 years later I found myself in a treatment centre. I was introduced to the recovery communities in Glasgow, and probably by accident. I knew there was somebody else in that recovery cafe, and I'd went up to see them. And it was more the social aspect of it that I liked, because I'd just come out of a residential treatment centre, whereas before that I was sitting in my own living room using drugs, using alcohol. So the social aspect of it, plus the fact I knew a couple of the guys. I knew a couple of guys from the area. I'd used drugs with them in the past, and they kind of disappeared after seeing them. And that happens, you usually think they're dead. And they kind of encouraged me to keep coming along, just keep coming along. It was probably about 4 or 5 months before I get involved in the volunteering it. And then through doing that volunteering, I get encouraged to go to college. Encouraged to just be open-minded to trying other things. That's part of one of the reasons I'm here today, because a lot of the stuff I've done, I've been trying to learn about all this stuff, trying to see where we can make changes, where we can make it better, where we can make it more efficient. And I think the recovery communities is a start. In care and treatment services have got a big part to play in all. You only need to look, I think it's Derby, they've just done a report on the addictions and the mental health teams coming together into the one team, and they're actually achieving better outcomes and better objectives. And I think that should maybe be, I mean, evidence-based practice speaks a lot, and it does do in care and treatment services. So you only need to look at that evidence-based practice, which is pretty positive, and get to Scotland, give Scotland the money so they can adopt it in their practices, and therefore it's better outcomes, better objectives, not only for the services, not only for the public purse, but for the people that are accessing the services, the people that are desperate for help, and the people that deserve to get the help.
I think what I'm seeing today up in Scotland is, in my place of work anyway, that the biggest barrier for people to come into recovery is a benefit system. You know, all services and care practices that work with people with addiction problems, it's all meant to be person-centred approaches, and in that person-centred approach, signposting them to multi-agencies if need be. So it's a person-centred approach with people for addictions, but they put this universal credit out there where one shoe fits all. And I've spoken to guys in hospital where they've been maybe in for a 30-day or to a 2-month period of mental health problems where they've been sectioned, and they've been discharged to advance payment of universal credit, and they've OD'd and they're back in hospital that same day. I've spoken to guys getting discharged from prison who have been after they've been liberated after maybe a year or a few months or a couple of years prison sentence to an advance payment on that universal credit, who are in there on methadone, who are in there in that prison actively using drugs, in there actively handing in the MDT tests, so they're getting discharged to an advance payment on universal credit and they're ODing that day. It's crazy.
Your thoughts?
I think my experience is quite different. I found my recovery through a different way, and I think that the barriers that I faced were quite different, maybe. We've got a lot of experience with young people right now in Dundee, I struggle to verbalise because our opinions are so different. My barriers were more to do with the treatment service, being prescribed methadone, quite similar. It wasn't until I took control of that myself that I then progressed into recovery properly. I think I was very lucky, just fortunate that I met the right people at the right time, because the things that exist now didn't exist back then. Like Scott has said as well, the recovery communities, I think, is the first protocol for anybody, whether you're trying to get into treatment or you're trying to have support during your recovery, or you've worked past that and you're now working with people in the community. And I think that they are, they're utilised in ways that maybe are beneficial to services and the people that work with mental health teams and stuff, but not to the recovery community as such, so it can grow in the way it should. It's quite organic and fluid and changes all the time. Most of the things that we've done in Dundee have been quite successful. The engagements we had with young people, like we spoke before, we started working with an off-site school right back at the start, and now we're having kids come out the other end of that off-site school, come into the recovery community, having peers advocate for them, getting them into education, employment, also helping them into housing, with family conflict and stuff. So to me, the recovery community is not, it's a community. Like, recovery is a word that's used at the start of that to describe a group of people that are taking proactive action in their communities to make them better. It just so happens that they've had issues with substance or mental health or things like that.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got John and then Hugh and Adri.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll repeat what others have said. We've all spoken very, very clearly about your experiences, which will undoubtedly help our understanding of this particular problem. But I wanted just to follow up something which Hannah mentioned. Before I was an MP, I was a member of the Scottish Parliament, and I visited Berlin Prison in Shotts and Kilmarnock and spoke to prisoners. And something you said I heard time and time again, which was, in prison, drugs were readily available. I think you spoke about the different types of drugs that you were able to use when you were in prison, and you also spoke about how it was easier for the prison officers just to allow that drug use to continue in terms of managing the prison and the people in it. And I've always found that very surprising, and insofar as I always think when people are in prison, surely that's an opportunity for the NHS and the prison service to take action to try and address that drug problem. I mean, do you think there's a fundamental failure of what's going on in prisons just now because we're not taking that action to address drugs, and because it is easier just to allow prisoners to use drugs? Is it just round the wrong way in terms of how we tackle drug abuse in prison?
So I think that it would be a very, very hard thing to tackle. I think that it would be you have a when you're a criminal and you're a drug user and you need drugs, you will find a way. You will find a way through, if it's manipulated, threatening, abusing. These prison staff are taking drugs into the prison. They're supplying drugs in the prison,
right.
And then they're going they're going home and living their lives, you know, and to crush that, I think you should have a really tough job to do that.
But do you think we're missing an opportunity? I guess is the point I'm making. So people arrive in prison like you did with a drug problem. Surely, if we're trying to tackle drug abuse, there's an opportunity there to say, well, yes, it's going to cost more money because it's going to be much more difficult to manage people when they're coming off the drugs. But there is an opportunity there to take action.
Yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there to take action. There's also, I'd say, an opportunity to look at the fact that when you're in prison, you're in a safe environment where you can detox. You know, so why detox somebody off of methadone, Suboxone, diazepam, mental health prescriptions, to then put them back on a month before they're getting released? You know, there's a system now put in place where if you go into prison with a dirty drug sample, when you get admissioned into prison, you give a drug sample, you then get a detox. That detox comes to an end. You then get offered a methadone script, where me personally myself have known I'm going to prison, so have then went out and bought drugs, knowing if I take them and go into prison, and I'm speaking from experience and hearing from I found out how to do that from seeing other prisoners doing it, knowing that I'll get put into prison, then to get put on methadone, so then I can be out my face my whole sentence, to get released or back onto a methadone program. And that is the cycle. There's 16-year-olds that are getting put in. I got out of prison in 2017, and they're now putting 16-year-olds are coming in with crack cocaine and heroin in their system, so they can get a diazepam detox, who are then getting put onto methadone, who are then coming back at the age into prison at maybe 3-4 months later, age 17, 18, 19. And then they're progressing from smoking cannabis to being put onto methadone in prison, to being released, to being on heroin addiction.
Does that not make you all very sad?
It's horrendous.
Can I answer that? I work for Fourfather Recovery Community, and in that we've got Glen Oakle, Pullman and Cottonvale in our local area. So we've been in there, me and a couple of my co-workers, and we've trained girls and guys in being recovery volunteers, so they can run their own recovery cafes in with the prison. So, and especially in Pullman, it's been really successful. They've been asking us to go in. As like yesterday in my team meeting, there was 2 officers. I wasn't there, officers, because down here. There was 2 officers from Pullman in my team meeting that I should have been at yesterday, and they're crying out for more of us to go back in there, because they said the lived experience of us going in there, talking to the girls and doing the stuff in the recovery cafes with them is a lot more superior to what a drug worker and that could go in and do. So, but we were so really, we can only do so many hours of that because we're so caught up in a lot of other stuff, you know. And I think there needs to be a specific pot of funding for recovery cafes or recovery-based stuff in prisons.
And the other point I just wanted to, and it sort of links into this, I think Sharon mentioned that you just happened to meet the right people who pointed you in the right direction, allowed you to come off methadone and break the cycle of drug use. And I'm always amazed that, you know, if I was to take a dose of methadone, it would kill me. I mean, methadone in itself is a very powerful drug. And many people are very frustrated that a lot of drug users get parts of methadone, and it's just seen as a way to manage and deal with the problem. I mean, do you think the system is working in that you just happen to speak to the right people, and most people won't have that opportunity just to speak to the right people because the system's just breaking down?
There's supporting people have been on methadone since they were 15, 30 years, and now there's 2 generations in each family that are now either on methadone or are a chaotic drug user, involved in social. I've not got a great opinion of methadone. I think done right for a very short period of time, it could work, but I think there is a lot more and better ways to help somebody get past that stage.
So proper managed decline of dosage to get them to a point of being completely clear. So you think too many people are just being left on methadone and not properly managed off that addiction?
I took control of my detox. I was on methadone for 3 years. I was only on a very low dose compared to some people, and reduced over 2 weeks. I was advised not to do it. I was told it would kill me and blah, blah, blah. But I did that
But of course, sorry, Jim, but if people were then to go through that process in prison, going back to my earlier point, the idea that prison officers would be able to manage the very challenging circumstances which would then be created as prisoners were going through the declining dose of methadone, the cold turkey process, they just couldn't manage it.
No.
So, my personal experience of coming off methadone was I came off it myself. I had enough and I poured my methadone down the sink and I done it cold turkey. I locked myself. One of my family members locked me in the house for 5 days so I could go through the process. But where it comes into recoveries, I think it gets completely diluted in the fact that people... there's a bar set of recovery in the state that people have this ideal life that they want to get clean from all drugs. But then you have people that are promoting recovery that are still on drugs. And there's like that barrier there of where's the bar set for somebody that wants to come off of drugs if they're then getting peer mentored by somebody that's still on prescription drugs, that's still on maybe diazepam, methadone, because this is happening in recovering communities. And that's the kind of, I think that needs to be addressed as well. And also, like, I got into recovery to pursue a life, so I could leave drugs behind, so I could leave that part of my life behind, not constantly be reminded by it on a daily basis. You know, I'm now studying and have outside things from drug use that I'm involved with, and it's amazing going into them things being anonymous and not having to be daily reminded that I was a drug addict. And there's that barrier of once somebody gets clean and they have this support network and this group of people that are helping them, how do they then progress on to the next level of their life, where they can maintain a status in society of just being them, just being, I'm just Hannah. I'm not Hannah the recovering addict or Hannah the addict. I'm Hannah that's studying and trying to get a degree. I'm Hannah that volunteers at my niece's Brownies Club. I'm Hannah. I'm not Hannah the addict, and that's the kind of that's what you want to strip from them. That's what people want. Just want to be them, you know. And it's amazing that people are setting up recovery, and there's all these beautiful things that are going on out in Scotland. But there's also a lack of how do I just become me? How can I get from this mental, psychotic drug user whose life was so chaotic and unmanageable into society and adjust there? And I think there's a lack of processing and funding for that kind of bit as well.
Hugh, Gaffney next, Hugh.
I think you might have had a point here, because last night it was a debate in the chamber, the Parliament, about cannabis. And the Minister finished up by saying, we need to look at alternatives. But Colin, you were on methadone for 15 years. That's supposed to be an alternative. No, prescribed drugs. No, drugs and drugs. No, I know it was cannabis was discussed last night.
All right.
We're trying to think a way forward. And what the Minister finished up by saying, we need to look at alternative medicines to basically change over from drugs to medicines. But Hannah, you were saying they upped your medicine, you know, and what I'm trying to say is there's no quick fix, is there? That's what I'm trying to say. Is there a quick fix?
Did they not need to look at, and I'm sorry, I'm very opinionated in this,
no, don't apologise.
Do they not need to look at the fact of maybe taking drugs away? And I know that's substantial.
Yeah.
Substantial. I know how after military pharmacists, the amount of money that it brings into the government, but you're pumping people full of you're giving people methadone prescriptions and pumping people full, and they're walking around like zombies, and they think that's okay. They're feeding their misery, and they're putting them on prescriptions, which is leading to other drugs, which is a vicious cycle. Me personally, like, open more rehab centres, put them into the rehab centres, detox them, show them that they can live a life without drugs, they can have happiness and feelings and emotion and joy without deluding their mind full of substances.
Well, methadone came into addiction for harm reduction back in the late 80s because of the spread of HIV and all that stuff up in Scotland. I was speaking to somebody for the SRC 2 nights ago on the phone, and he was telling me that he was at a thing at Stirling University, and pharmaceutical companies and that were there, and they were talking about having buprenorphine, and they were trying to put this forward to the government, but the NHS are holding them back on it, putting buprenorphine into one injection, where the person receiving it will get it once a week, where they can still try and go and hold down jobs, because methadone, well, on a daily prescription like that for a length of period of time, it's holding people back. I mean, look at my brother's a prime example. So I think I need to look at shorter usage of prescription drugs and make it more back to harm reduction rather than a continued long period of time.
Okay, thank you.
I think the methadone and the buprenorphine discussion, I think it was agreed that buprenorphine's got a better success rate in England than methadone has in Scotland. And if Scotland can adopt the buprenorphine programme and get the same results as same results as England is getting with buprenorphine, and it takes away that whole stigma of methadone, and it gives guys that stability to try and address their drug issues, try and address their prescription, and therefore get a better quality of life.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Deidre.
Hi, thank you very much for coming down and speaking with us, because, I mean, without your experiences and being that informing this inquiry, I mean, you know, we can speak to all the experts in the field as you like, but you speaking to us is so important. So thank you for that. I just wanted to ask about the attitudes in Scotland generally to drug taking, problem drug taking, because the Scottish Drugs Forum gave evidence to us saying that they thought Scotland has a pretty judgmental attitude to drug use, more so than I think elsewhere in the UK. They seem to be suggesting that there's a sort of stigma attached to it, and that's acting as a sort of brake on developing better responses to problem drug use. I just wondered, you know, we can see and hear what's being said in the media, and I just wondered if you think that is the case. Do you think that sort of attitude that people are seeing in the media is causing, you know, people not to really seriously explore options around things other than methadone use, for example? Or, I mean, I know there's been a shift from problem drug use being approached through the criminal justice system in Scotland and much more looking at it in a public health, more holistic way, and I think that's a really positive development. And maybe, Scott, when you mentioned that you had a service worker who showed you compassion and spoke to you and heard you, if you like, for the first time, maybe that was part of that shift. I don't know, but I certainly hope that would be the case. But I just wonder what you think about, you know, what you're seeing in the press about drug use and what difference it makes.
I think the stigma's always going to be present, but I think we can challenge it. And part of the stigma that I seen in the papers, I kind of took that on board, and it became the self-stigma towards myself. And then I found stuff like the recovery communities, the Scottish Recovery Walk every year, and I had to change that mindset. Instead of focusing on the self-stigma, my addiction, my drug use, what people thought of me, I had to change that whole mindset to celebrate your recovery now. You're in recovery. That's a lifestyle that's past me. I don't take drugs anymore. I try and be a productive member of society. I try and help out my community where I can, and I try and help out other communities where I can, in Glasgow and out with Glasgow.
Media has a huge part to play. The language they use and how they portray people that use drugs or people that have got issues even with mental health or that. I think over the last few years that has slowly changed, but I think as long as taking drugs is illegal, there'll always be stigma attached to drug use or addiction, and those in society that are not immersed in that lifestyle will always have that stance towards people, lack of understanding and education of where it comes from and why it exists. I think also has a huge part to play. But yeah, media has definitely got the language you use sometimes is horrendous, the images and things like that. They dehumanise people. They're not treated as human beings, they're treated as less than. And that's been the case for a long time. Since the war on drugs, I think.
We're coming to the end of the session. This has been absolutely fascinating. I think we're all ever so grateful to all of you for helping us out with this and better understanding some of the issues around addiction and some of the difficulties and problems it could bring. I'm maybe going to be a wee bit unfair to you, because you've got a group of MPs in front of you just now who's doing an inquiry on this. If there was one thing that you would recommend to us about how to improve the situation for problem drug users and could have helped you possibly in your past, what would be that one thing? And I don't want a huge big answer, but just let us know what that thing would be. And I can see Hannah smiling, so we're going to come to her
For
first.
me, a 12-step programme.
12-step programme?
Yeah, a 12-step programme of abstinence.
Scott?
Change the 1971 drug legislation. Give Scotland their own power, or if not, change it UK-wide.
Okay. Sharon?
I agree with Scott. Yeah.
Colin?
I think there's got to be more counterintuitive approaches kind of addressed. It's all right evidence-based, but sometimes you need to be radical to seek the change you want.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for that advice. I mean, the way this is going to work, we're going to obviously collate what you've told us today, which will go in to shape up and help us with our inquiry. We're speaking to a number of different groups just about all of this. We'll be speaking to ministers who's responsible for drugs policy, and this will be going on until the summer when we have a recess in July. After that, we'll be coming back and compiling that report in the new session of Parliament, which is usually about October. And if there's anything else that you feel that you could usefully contribute, because we want to hear from people who've had the lived experience, get in touch with us again and share that with us. But I want to thank you ever so much just for being so straightforward and honest with this.
See all this inquiry that you're doing, the inquiry just now, over the last 10 years you've been inquiring about misuse of drugs in Scotland. Nothing much has came out of it. Not a lot of funding. What is your initial, what process do you want to follow? Because it's all well and being that this is happening and we've been flown up here and we've been put into a hotel and it's beautiful, but is this more for media or publicity or to prove that Westminster are trying to make a change and trying to cover their arses, or is something going to get done?
I'm glad you put that so delicately there, and so thank you for that. I mean, we're a select committee of the House of Commons, so what we do is we have these reports and inquiries, and once it's evidence-based. Everything about this committee is evidence-based, so it's all down to what we hear and the quality of the evidence. So we're not going to muck about with any of that. We will reflect that in our report. And then what that report does is make recommendations based on the evidence that we secure. We then present that to the UK government, because that's who is responsible to this select committee. And they'll then respond to that. And we can't obviously change the UK government, it'll be up to them. But what we are is a cross-party select committee of MPs. So the reports that we produce obviously have value because of that. It's
becoming drug death becoming an epidemic.
But we want to, and I think you could see the seriousness of the session we had, and we really want to try and do the best we possibly can to get a fully informed report and get the right type of people to tell us exactly what we need to do. So on that